Over 40 years ago, I'm rather embarrassed to say that figure, sitting in a classroom at Leobeck College, where Rabbi Igor and I both trained to become rabbis, he a few years later than me, I hasten to add, I was fortunate to have as one of my teachers Dr. David Patterson, founding president of the Oxford Centre for Hebrew and Jewish Studies. Dr. Patterson's specialism was the foundation of modern Hebrew literature in 19th century Russia and its development in pre-1948 Palestine and then the State of Israel. He was a warm and inspiring teacher, the very essence of a modest and thoughtful scholar, and such was the nature of his teaching that I remember one particular class he taught us. He brought to the classroom the opening pages of a novel by the writer Shalom Jacob Abramovich, also known by his nom de plume, Mendele Mocher Sephorim, Mendele the bookseller. The novel was originally written in Yiddish and published in 1869. It begins with Mendele, an itinerant seller of holy books, out on the road in the middle of summer. It's the 17th of Tammuz, a fast day in the Jewish calendar, a day commemorating the breach in the city walls of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, 3 weeks before Tisha B'Av, the date that commemorates the destruction of the temple. The somber season of mourning and the fast day dictate that Mendele must close his eyes to the beauty of nature around him and focus only on his prayers and devotion. The sun scarcely begun to shine, and sweet summer's in the land, and folks have got so they are feeling newborn and glad-hearted for seeing God's good earth looking fair again. Well, don't you know, but that's just when our somber season sets in and the time comes for Jews to start mourning and shedding tears in earnest. For it's then the whole roster of sad observances must be got through, and it's then that I, mind you, Reb Mendele the book peddler, have my work cut out and come into my own, making the circuit of Jewish towns with my cartload of stock, from which I furnish the kindred with all the rueful necessaries of the rites of weeping. Mendele recalls one fast of Tammuz when he was on the road, deep in his devotions, wrapped in his talit and tefillin, seated on his perch in the driver's box of his cart, looking to all the world quite Jewish, as he puts it, his eyes shut tight to prevent him from seeing the cheery light of the day, lest it should interfere with his prayers. But the dazzling sun, the fields flecked with pinkish-white buckwheat blossoms, the grassy glens with stands of nutwood trees, thickets of pine and walnut, and a pool of crystal-clear water beguile him, and he struggles between the requirement to be sad and miserable and enjoying the beauty of the natural world, which he knows is forbidden. It is a satirical, self-deprecating, humorous piece, but on a more serious level, as Rabbi Dahlia Marks notes in her book From Time to Time, Mendele is expressing a tension between the beauty and vivacity of nature and Judaism's religious culture with its mood of sadness and mourning during these summer weeks, which in Hebrew are referred to as Bein HaMetzarim, between the straits, between the narrow pieces. From the 17th of Tammuz to the 9th of Av, at the height of the summer, we are required to recall the tragedies that befell our people in the past. Not only the destruction of the first temple, but the destruction of the second temple at the hand of the Romans, the fall of Beitar, the Crusades of the Middle Ages, the expulsion of the Jews from England, from the Iberian Peninsula in 1492 and 1520, the pogroms of 19th century Russia, and the Shoah, a catalogue of catastrophes, the memory of which impose an institutionalized period of mourning on us as a people. And there is no more intense time of sadness than during the first week or the first 9 days of the month of Av, the 5th month of the Hebrew calendar. And this month begins tonight and culminates on the 9th of Av, a full fast day of 25 hours, during which no studying is permitted except for mournful texts, which include, of course, the Book of Lamentations, traditionally attributed to the prophet Jeremiah, who lived through the destruction of the temple. Lamentations, Eicha in Hebrew, is a 5-chapter lament over the destruction of the first temple, 5 elegies that describe the utter devastation and ruin of Zion, the land and its inhabitants. Zion, personified as a lonely widow, weeping in the night with none to comfort her, is empty of her festival pilgrims, her gates deserted, her enemies now her masters. Is not in the Book of Lamentations the innocent prey of Babylon's victors. On the contrary, Jerusalem, says the poet, has sinned. Her uncleanness clings to her skirts. She has sunk appallingly. For the sages of the rabbinic period, Israel, the people Israel, are not seen as victims at this point in history, but as authors of their own crimes. On account of 3 things, the first temple was destroyed, says the Talmud, because the people were guilty of idolatry, sexual immorality, and bloodshed. And the second temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, baseless hatred. There is no moral relativism here. The rabbis measure the people's conduct in the light of a permanent order to the universe. There is no room for moral preferences, for individual moral preferences around faith, sexuality, one's likes and dislikes. Lamentations, Eicha, and the rabbis' theological reflections on the 9th of Av are ruthless in portraying a God who is angry, without pity, who uses the Babylonians as a divine agent to punish the people. The devastation is relentless. Little children beg for bread. Those who feasted on dainties lie famished in the streets. Those whose bodies were like sapphire are unrecognized in the streets. Their skin has shriveled on their bones. Better off were the slain of the sword than those slain by famine. These are all images from the book of Eicha. It is not difficult to hear and see in these ancient texts images of destruction, desolation, and hunger in war-torn countries. Pity and compassion lie with our own people in the state of Israel, for those who waited for help and rescue from the army on October the 7th, for the hostages languishing deep in tunnels, many now dead, some perhaps still alive, without access to medical aid, and our pity and compassion rest equally with the people of Gaza, doubly punished by their own Hamas terrorist leaders and by Israel's government and military commanders. There are those who see Israel's war against Hamas as justified, to be prosecuted until the hydra-headed monster is dead. But others will argue that Israel's longest war of nearly 22 months has become a war of unspeakable crimes, the veracity of which will need to be tested in the International Criminal Court. As liberal Jews, whose attachment to the state of Israel and its people is bound up with our spiritual heritage and with our place here in the diaspora of world Jewry, we need to place ourselves firmly in a place of objective justice, driven by equity and human rights. If, as human beings, as Jews, we subscribe to the belief that every human being is created but Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, that all humanity has a basic and inalienable right to water, to food, to sanitation, to education, medical aid, to a home and a land to call their own, then we must stand firmly with those whose combat is for a ceasefire, for the release of the hostages, and for the Palestinian people's right to their own homeland. Like Mendele, the bookseller, caught between the tensions of the natural world and the impositions of his religious life, we must not be paralyzed by the shame and pain of what we see happening in Gaza and on the West Bank. The poet of Lamentations does not abandon all hope, even in this darkest period of his life. I thought my strength and hope had perished before the Eternal One, he writes. But no, he summons strength from the deepest part of his soul to say, but this do I call to mind, therefore I have hope. The kindness of the Eternal One has not ended. God's mercies are not spent. They are renewed every morning. Ample is your grace. The Eternal One is my portion, I say with a full heart. Therefore will I hope in him. Let us not give up confidence in a future envisioned by the prophets, when violence shall no more be heard in the land, devastation or destruction within its borders, when swords will be beaten into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more, but everyone shall sit under their vine and under their fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. Amen.